just having a discussion, and some of you who are listening or viewing may need to chime in at some point. You cannot see Amy; she's in the production area. You can see Dr. Ezel and me, Dr. Rayner. I've tried to get her away from me, particularly of using the doctor stuff in the organization. I'm trying to get everybody on a first name basis now. For sure, we will continue to honor the Dr. Ezel. So we're not going to minimize that. But she's having so much trouble calling me Thom. She'll write Thom in an email, but she won't say Thom. So I've just decided, Kevin, that maybe the best nomenclature for me coming from you in this podcast is the Most Holy Reverend Doctor. How does that sound?
Hey, that works for me. Works for me.
I'll do the same for you, Dr. Ezel.
Right.
Hey, we got some really good stuff for you, audience, and we're presenting this for the first time through Revitalize and Replant, of course, sponsored by the North American Mission Board. And this is what's called qualitative research. I don't want to bore you with the nature of this research, but I think you need to know because sometimes we get questions about, how many surveyed and did it do the margin of error? That's called quantitative research. It's a good type of research. We do that as well. This is qualitative, where we get information on an ongoing basis. We have sets of questions that we ask when we're doing consultation, coaching, informal conversation, and so on. And when it's all said and done, we're able to get information that we can report to you. What we have is, again, what statisticians call a point of saturation. I know I'm boring you to death, but there will be a few people out there who'll have this question. And a point of saturation means we're getting the same answers again and again. So that means in qualitative research, you're beginning to get confidence that you have a pattern that you can discuss. Was that boring, Kevin?
It's borderline. You're right on the line. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt bored just listening to me say it. When I have Sam on, he makes stats interesting. I don't know how he does it. I'm there. They go to sleep. Oh, I got to tell you this, Kevin. I was recording a video for a book and a video curriculum that is coming out this year called "I Am a Christian." And no, it was before. It was a week before that. I was doing videos. Never mind. I was doing videos, and I did 76 videos in 3 days. They were about 12 minutes each. It was challenging. Well, it wasn't just challenging for me. On the second day, I'm just speaking away, trying to keep my energy up, and I hear the videographer. I am boring.
That's funny.
I mean, he was so embarrassed. His fellow videographer had to wake him up, and I said, "I guess we cut on that one, don't we?"
Oh, that's too funny. It's just good to know it happens to you too, though.
Oh gosh, believe me, I can bore the best of them. So I wanted to give you the nature of the research. The nature of the research is that it's qualitative. Now, here's my guess. I bet Kevin Ezel has been doing qualitative research himself. He may not know that he's doing qualitative research, but I mean, how many different leaders do you have conversations in the course of a month? I know it's speculation, but pastors and others, you talk to them all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. It's an ongoing poll in your mind, and you get it. You feel pretty confident. Your read on certain things based on the interaction, and because I'm fortunate or cursed, depends on how you look at it. Because I talk with people all over the country and not just in one particular county,
Yes. Yes. You don't have the local contextualization. You have a national view. So a North American view, because you are the North American mission.
Well, it's like when Pastor said, "Well, everybody I talk to," it's like, yeah, you're only talking to 5 people that you live by. Other people have different perspectives. So.
And a typical response I get, well, in my experience, well, okay, that's your experience. I'm going to give you the experience of about 2,000 people. We'll talk about that. So we're going to take 3 parts. So join us for all 3 parts, whether you're watching us on YouTube or your favorite podcasting app. I think we've said that so many times that it almost flows out of my mouth without thinking. So wherever you listen to us. By the way, if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe. subscribe to our channel so that we can continue to build that audience, because it's all free for everybody. The North American Mission Board is gracious enough to make this available at no cost to you. And if you listen to us, give us a rating and review. So the nature of the research, this is qualitative research, not quantitative. That's a good kind. Not longitudinal. There's another kind. I'm not going to get into that. This is qualitative
It's starting to
research.
go boring again.
Okay, I'm going to get back on track and at least try to have something that has some level of interest. Okay, Kevin, my second point here is a review of issues of acceleration and exacerbation. And I want to hear your experience, but I'll tell the audience exactly what I mean by these two terms. Really, what was happening before the pandemic continued to happen with churches after the pandemic. It just happened faster and harder. So if a church was declining, it declined even more. If a church was growing, it tends to be one of the churches that is coming back more quickly. So the pandemic did not change the trajectory, it sped up the trajectory. Now, tell me what you're seeing on that, Kevin.
No, that would be spot on. That's exactly what I'm saying. And I mean, it just coming off. We're taping this in the spring, so we're just coming off of a kind of a ramp up for a lot of churches, and that's exactly the same case.
As you talk to the churches, I'm going to ask you to pull a number out of the air.
All
That's
right.
called statistical research. Pull a number out of the air. Guess what percentage of churches are now growing post pandemic or not growing? That would be plateaued or declining. Just guess.
I'd say growing maybe 25%.
Okay, our number is 21%.
Whoa! Hey,
Do you
that's not
see?
bad.
Now, you see what I mean? You're doing qualitative research. You have never added up all the numbers,
Yeah,
but you're now thinking to yourself, probably 1 out of 4 of them are growing.
yeah, yeah.
And
That's
ours is around 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5.
yeah.
So 21% of churches are growing post pandemic. That's not that much different than pre pandemic.
Right,
So
right.
that has not changed that. So I want to give Kevin Ezell a gold star. Did you ever have a teacher that gave gold stars or any kind of awards?
I was typically in the corner, so I didn't see what she was passing out.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you did well on that one, because 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 churches growing. That was pretty much where we were pre-pandemic. So a church that was declining. I'm going to give you an example because we just got back from a consultation in Texas, near Fort Worth, but not in Fort Worth. And our team did this consultation. Not going to even give the denomination or non-denomination. Not going to identify it in any way. But this church was running 340 pre-pandemic, and now it's running 130, 140 post-pandemic. And how much were they averaging in attendance in 2021? 130, 140. How much are they averaging today? About the same. They have lost half of their people, and there's no indication that they're coming back. Why? Because they did not have a plan to reach people before the pandemic, and they didn't have a plan to reach them after. Is it ever so simple, Kevin, that you just suggest to a church if they want to reach some people, they may try reaching them?
Yeah. It's interesting that I think the pandemic was the great excuse for a lot of guys, and now it's more of the great reveal, like you said.
Ooh, that's
And
tweetable.
because for years it's everybody's blaming on everything on the pandemic, but now I mean we come even we don't have to wear a mask on a plane anymore. Even I mean, we're pretty well moving out of it.
At
And
least today,
yeah.
with the federal judge ruling as of
Hey,
yesterday.
I'm about to head to the airport, and I am giddy. I'm gonna show up early just so I can walk around.
You're right. That mask has been a pain in the face.
Yeah, and that 99.5% of the people I have encountered. since I'm so good at these. But no, you're exactly right. I do think though now it's revealing what was already there. And Tom, I don't know what you've seen, but I've seen it really have a greater effect on some of our more ethnic churches have had a harder time, and I don't know how that mixes with your percentages or not, but um, on the comeback. I think
Again, with qualitative research, I don't have the breakdown by ethnicity or racial group, but you're probably right. I want to go. What did you say this was? The Great Reveal?
well, I'm just saying instead of being an excuse now, it's really revealing what was there all along, and and I think pastors. I've tried to encourage pastors. They outplay their hand if they keep using this for an excuse, because it's like driving to New Orleans and they still bring up Katrina.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Our
it's been a while. You
our,
know,
our, our Christian organizations that are still struggling and say, hey, the problem is COVID. So yeah,
yeah,
it can be used of churches. It can be used of anything at this
right.
time. The reason I wanted to write it down is I thought that'd be a great article I could write and give credit
No,
to the Most Holy Reverend Dr. Ezel
yeah.
from excuses from. I'll come up with something that is a little catchy on that, but
Your
man,
vocabulary is bigger. You can come up with a better word than reveal.
no, I actually think that's a good one.
And great exposure. Although
No,
that sounds
I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to use exposure.
yeah.
But for right now, I like the idea of reveal, and I'll give credit where credit is due. Have you told a church, Kevin, or a church leader? I don't guess you tell churches. Have you told a church leader that the world that you had before COVID is not coming back? In other words, if those people are gone, the likelihood of them returning is slim. And if you haven't been reaching people before, you're going to have trouble. Have you
Right.
given some kind of comment to that to people?
Absolutely. I just told the pastor recently, I said, have you ever planted a church? And he said, no. I said, well, you're about to. I mean,
Yes.
because church planters grow their churches by reaching people, and it's not by transfer growth. And a lot of our existing pastors have really been thrust almost into a church planting mode because they have to go out there and till the ground at a much greater pace than they did before. There's a lot less maintenance. Um, I mean, churches they, they just remember what they used to be and what they are, and they're. Uh, I, I coming off of this spring though. I've really been so excited about the ones that are kicking in. They're kicking in strong, and they've always been. I think it's because they throughout the pandemic remained financially very stable,
Right.
and that's what I'm most afraid of. Is some of these guys that man they're down, but they're financially stable. Money can hide a good bit of dysfunction. And I say I wouldn't go by the offering as much as by who you're reaching and how many you're baptizing and that type of thing. But
Well, the church that I mentioned to you in Texas that remains unnamed, 140, 150, 160 attendants in that range, they have $3 million in the bank.
yeah,
And I'm looking at their net attrition rate of about 20 to 22,
hmm
and that's in attendance. And
oh man,
I said you'll be dead in
hmm
about 7 to 8 years. I
right,
said now you're going to have plenty of money when you die, but you're going to be dead. So
right,
yeah, and another thing that has happened is Uncle Sam gave a lot of money to a lot of institutions. There was PPP, and then there was this thing about payroll, and then there are these tax credits, and then the people in the churches were receiving money as well, and
hmm
from the government. And so, as Sam will put it, there's been a lot of liquidity injected into the market. That's a way of saying
yeah,
a lot of churches and a lot of people have a lot of cash,
right,
and that can hide the problem.
right, right, and sometimes it can be your worst enemy. You know that not
Yeah.
having enough or having too much, and it really does disguise. That's often people go straight to that number, and it'll disguise a lot of dysfunction, in my opinion. So,
A case study of a church that is declining post COVID. Again, Kevin, putting you on the spot here. We obviously are not asking for a name. I know you wouldn't give it anyway, but can you just maybe whether you're talking about one church or talking about a combination of several, just kind of describe that church, if you will, that is declining post COVID.
Um, a church that's declining would typically, uh, would be constant reflecting about the past,
Yep, the
talking about the past,
past is the hero.
right? And past, slash excuses, and
Excuses are the norm. Past is the hero. I'm writing these down. I may
and
use
then
them
and
sometime.
then typically, I think one pretty consistent theme is they start talking about the depth that they provide, uh, as opposed to the, I think sometimes they defend how many they have, because, well, we just do we go deeper in God's word, and it's more about the growing people in a deeper way than the numbers, which again, I think that's just a jealous spin, if nothing else.
Yeah, we've had for years churches say we're a discipleship church, not an evangelism church,
Right.
as if the Great Commission can be split into different parts. You go
Yeah.
and make disciples. Obviously, that means you're winning them to Christ, and
I just
then
had,
you
I'm
teach them.
No, you're exactly right. I just had a discussion with a guy, and he was complaining about a guy and the way they baptized and and I was like, you're at a distinct advantage. And he said, "What do you mean I'm at a distinct advantage?" I said, "Because you don't baptize that many." And so, yeah, I mean, when you baptize five, how much controversy can there be? But when you're reaching people, that brings all sorts of unique pastoral judgments and challenges that you got to make, um, constantly. And you're at a distinct disadvantage when lost people are lost. They just they do lost things. And when your church is more of a, glorified museum, it's just going to be different. And
Ooh, glorified museum.
oh yeah, right. You've heard that before. I got that out of one of your books, I'm sure.
No, you did not. Amy can tell you she's read all my books, and I haven't even read them all.
No.
I've written them all. I haven't read them all. I want to go back to the church in Texas that I'm using as a case study. I've told you what they were pre-COVID, what they are post-COVID, and the fact that they're not growing. Kevin, we have two primary instruments that we use when we're helping a church. They're not magical tools. They're two really good things. One is a basic demographic psychographic study called Know Your Community. The other one that we've had, at least I've had in some way or another, since 1996 is called Know Your Church. And that one is particular, where they're both revealing. There's that word reveal. And this particular church, there are 120 questions that relate to each of the six purposes of the church: evangelism, prayer, ministry, fellowship, discipleship, worship. And then there's 10 kind of extra questions that are biblical. And I typically go to those 10 questions first. Well, I'll just give you the summary. 7 out of 10 of the people who responded believe that people can go to heaven in ways other than Jesus.
Oh my word.
That's the pastor was a little more emphatic when I told him that. It was, it was unbelievable.
All right. Right.
So sometimes the underlying reason is it was always there, but it's a biblical reason. Look, first of all, it's unbiblical, it's heretical. Second of all, from just a practical point of view, people aren't going to try to reach people for the gospel if they think that anybody can get saved through other religions. There's no
Right.
motivation.
Right.
And so, after all this work that we did and trying to help them with methodologies, that's coming out to be the first thing we have to address. We can't talk about methodologies till you get your gospel right. So
Right.
there's part of that case study, and because it's only 10 of the 130 questions, it doesn't feel like a theological exam, but it's been some of the most revealing. Hey, I'm getting that word now. It's been some of the most revealing things that we have seen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kevin, we've been talking about the churches that aren't growing. The purpose of our research is really the next two podcasts. So I'm going to ask all of y'all to return to the next two podcasts. Of course, Amy and Kevin, but also all of you in the audience. We're going to talk about the case for hope of churches that are not growing by talking about this 25%, as Kevin's methodological research has shown, and the 21%, as our research has shown at Church Answers as well. And we're going to talk about the case for growing churches. Sum it up, Kevin. Why should a declining church believe that they can become a growing church in this post-COVID world? Oh, let's leave it with you.
That's kind of, but well, they should believe because the gospel is still very active and effective. I mean, my word, it changes lives. And I think sometimes it's easy to, when you get in a rut and you get distracted, you get derailed a bit, focusing on why you really started to do this. And it's about the change lives. I mean, that's just to constantly look at where it can be, and look around and see. Man, my word, if you're set the church up to where it's not focused on that, and it's nothing's going to change, and it's going to just eventually die when they can't pay the light bill. So that's what's so sad. When you see so many churches, you think, my word, if I had a lost neighbor, I would not bring them here
Mm.
because it's not gonna. And that's the question they need to be asking themselves. And it really starts with the leader, the pastor.
Good way to wrap it up. We have been looking at how churches are growing in a post-COVID world. The first part with Kevin Ezell has been talking about the churches that aren't growing. We needed to give the comparisons or the control group, if you would, in a statistical study. But in the next two parts of our podcast series on how churches are growing, we're going to go to what they're doing, and they're growing as a result. And so part two on how churches are growing in a post-COVID world will be about attitudes. So much has to do with what is your attitude. And we're going to talk about attitudinal shifts in the growing church in a post-COVID world. And then, of course, by the time we get to part three, we'll be talking about the actions as well. Thanks, Kevin. This has been good stuff.
No, thank you.
Always great to be with you, and thank you, audience. You're growing. You're giving us great feedback. And oh, Kevin, I just got to tell you, I sent you an email yesterday. I know you saw it and responded, but I love hearing how people will listen to this podcast, and it makes all the difference in the world. It makes all the difference in the world in their church and that revitalization. So,
Well,
yeah,
it's fun
shout
to
out.
be a part of it. I think they watch it and say, "Hey, if those guys can do it, surely I can."
I think, yeah, they look at Rayner and let's say Ezel and Rayner. That would be Dumb and Dumber. I'll put it in that order. Thank you again for listening and watching Revitalize and Replant. We'll see you in the next episode where we will start talking about the attitudinal shift in growing churches in a post-COVID world. We'll see you then.